definition of feminism. Feminism is the, I haven't thought about that. I talk about feminism's own definition in the book, and I take that apart. But what would be my definition of feminism? I would say it would be women's sincere understanding of the gender picture in society. However, mistaken. Sincere but mistaken understanding of the gender picture in society, of the balance of power between men and women. That's my personal definition. I just made it up. I haven't had one before.
Fair enough, fair enough. And just as a quick follow-up, because I think there might be a lot to be gotten out of a wider reading of feminism, because I can think, I studied care ethics, which is a particular feminist school that perfectly captures what you're describing as women's power and puts it in terms of sort of relationships between genders. So, I mean, maybe it's just your talk's title, but it seems like your opposition to feminism writ large might be overreaching what is perhaps a valid criticism in picture.
Perhaps. Yes.
Yeah, I'm an economist, so I come from a different perspective, and I'm just curious about your assumption that the behavior of not seeing power is an assumption that you see seeing the power which is exercised. Why do you assume that it's not conscious and it's not utilized the way men use, let's say, economic power? We're very explicit how it's used in a company, how it's used in a government, that you use money, you use your financial power for very simple purposes. Why would not the females use their shaming power very, very precisely to further their career or money ambitions? Well, why would you assume that it doesn't exist?
Well, it's not an assumption, it's an observation. And I told those stories about how I carefully watched, for instance, the women in the Ottawa Home Men's Forum shaming us men. And I saw that they felt sincerely powerless. I observed that. That's been my observation whenever I've looked at women speaking in that way. That they're not typically in touch with how powerful that is. They're typically coming from a place of distress and victim and fighting back. Yes?
I think when we feel powerless, then we use those things, we shame and we use our sexual energy. And when we finally come to our power, then we use it positively.
I think you're right.
Because by definition, we wouldn't use it that way if we were more conscious about ourselves.
Yes.
Yeah. I have to tell you up front, I'm a feminist, and have been by my life, what's happened to me. And there's all kinds of jobs I wasn't offered. I'm 73, so in 1965, I had a baby. I got married, I had a baby. I applied for a job at the Ottawa Catholic School Board, and it doesn't matter which school, because I can't think of St. Joseph, I think, and it was for a one-year term. And the priest called me and he liked my resume, he got it, blah, blah, blah. 2 hours before, 11 o'clock, I was supposed to go there for one for the interview. He said, I just have one thing to ask you, are you married? And I said, yes. And he said, well, I'm not interviewing you, we don't hire married women. So my point, I was in a violent relationship, I had a baby, I was getting the stuffing beaten out of me, and I couldn't get employed. And that's one example, but then I get into the government. Within 3 weeks, I got this guy over sexually assaulting me. I don't mean he raped me, I mean he did something very inappropriate that I would if it was today, I'd call the police. My point being, I'm a feminist, but I had to be. Because of my life, because of what's happened to me in my life and my friends. And I think, for me, all feminism is equality between the sexes, and women should be financially independent, and so should men. So if the relationship is bad, whether you're married, not married, whatever you are, you can get out of it.
Well,
Okay. I went to the government, I worked 27 and a half years, I've got my pension, I've got an Audi sitting downstairs in the garage, and I have a beautiful house. And I don't have any man. But he left me, he left me alone here, because he was running around. So my point being is, I've been treated very badly by men. I'm not saying every man is bad. I'm saying that's my life experience, that's why I'm a feminist. And I'm not saying what you're saying and what I'm saying can't come together somehow, but I don't know.
Can I respond here?
Yeah.
Okay, I think I made a point of saying several times during my presentation that women's issues are very real. You know, the issues that feminism has raised, certainly years ago, less so today, but years ago, are real issues, you know, and they are about women's moving into men's traditional areas, like the workplace. Okay? So, yes, I mean, I hear all that you've said, and I don't disagree with any of it. What I'm pointing to is saying that men's issues are just as real and just as big, but much less known. So, for instance, we have passed laws in Canada and in the United States that basically address these issues, that now it is illegal to discriminate between men and women in hiring. It is illegal to discriminate between them in salary. We have basically passed laws to guarantee equality in all of the areas of men's traditional responsibility. But we have found ways to not pursue equality in women's traditional areas where men want it. So, for instance, in the case of divorce and child custody, we have tender years doctrine, we have best interest of the child. We don't have a law that says shared parenting is what we should have between the father and the mother, right? So, and why don't we? Well, feminists opposed it. So, what I'm saying is we need to address men's issues with as much gusto as we've addressed women's issues. It doesn't mean we stop addressing women's issues. We need to do them both.
I just have one final thing. Mr. Wonderful worked at Nortel. You probably don't.
Yes.
First, thank you very much for a really interesting presentation and for a really innovative way of looking at the relationships between men and women. It certainly has given me some new insights, but it seemed to me that what you're primarily talking about is an understanding of what can affect the relations between men and women individually. I'm less convinced that you've captured the key factors that affect the relationships among men and women in society and in the political sphere.
Yeah.
Just to take a different view than this lady sitting in front of me here, as far as I'm concerned and based on personal experience, there is manifest discrimination against men by the government through the family law system and the Divorce Act. And there's other types of discrimination against men in employment and against boys in the educational system and so on. It would take a very long discussion to explain all of that, but I've experienced and I've seen it. But, and if you ask why does that persist, in many cases it's because of the influence of feminist groups, and particularly in the Department of Justice. Department of Justice, for example, if you go and look in the family law division of the Family of Justice, there's not a single male lawyer there. It's all women, and they have consistently advised the government not to change the Divorce Act, notwithstanding many years of reports on that behalf. So, is the purpose of C.A.F.E or of your group to pursue these issues of male-female relations almost as a psychological or interrelationship issue, or are you interested in getting involved in some of the political issues that affect men in society?
More of the politics for C.A.F.E. Now, understand that we've done two things here this evening. We've introduced C.A.F.E, and then we talked about my book and my personal theories. And I'm president of C.A.F.E, but I'm not speaking as president of C.A.F.E when I'm talking about my book. I'm speaking personally. So C.A.F.E is interested in offering services to men and their families, and offering and political advocacy. Those are the two main focuses. For me, my journey has been about understanding what's going on in society. To speak to your first point about the difference between the individual relationship and the wider, I think that what feminism discovered, or feminists discovered last century, was that the moral power that women have had in relationship with men, that has balanced men's physical power, there's been a kind of a balance of power there. They discovered that that worked on the public stage, on public politics, that they could shame men en masse into gender biased behavior, into supporting women's issues and ignoring their own. And so I think that this does explain the larger political dynamic as well. I mean, if you look at what feminism has given us, it's given us two words to make a really concise example. Two new words. One of them is feminism, which stands for the way everything should be. And the other one is patriarchy, which stands for everything that's wrong today. Notice that feminism is a female word. Patriarchy is a male word. So we've got this moral thing going on. And what I'm trying to do here is to step away from the moral thing and not about what's right and what's wrong, because I think that's a poor game. It's a finger pointing game. What I'm interested in is what works. So this model is a model in a health system. It's not a model in a moral system. Feminist model is a model in a moral system. It's about oppression. It's about what's wrong and what shouldn't be done. But I'm interested in a psychological understanding, in a health system. How do we work with this in a way that will move us forward? Let me say one more thing, because I forgot to put it in my presentation. And that is, this has been done before, changing from a moral to a health model, very successfully. And the group that did it was AA. 100 years ago, alcoholism was seen as a moral failing. It was moral degeneracy. It was lack of discipline. It was character defect. There were all kinds of organizations, the Women's Temperance League, the Anti-Saloon League, that were about reforming drunks. Okay? It didn't work. Nothing was working. And then two self-confessed drunks started something that came to be known as Alcoholics Anonymous. What did it do? They changed the notion of alcoholism from a moral failing, a character defect, to a disease. And for the first time, significant numbers of alcoholics started to recover. And they still are. It was probably the most powerful social movement of the 20th century. And I am hopeful that we can do something similar in gender. What we have now is we're stuck in a moral system, which is about what's wrong and finger pointing and addressing men because of their patriarchal power and their privilege and their abuse and all the rest, right? It's all finger pointing and it's all shaming and it's all not working. What do we do? What should we do? We should move to a health system, a health understanding. Okay.
I like your framework a lot, and I think you're actually being too modest with it. Have you thought of expanding it to the use of women and children as human shields by the Palestinians against Israel, a moral thing? It works. And also the immigrant invasion of southern Europe by boatloads. And have you read Raspai's Camp of the Saints? Because it covers all this moral. You should look at it either in English or French. Norman Shapiro's translation is the best one if you can get hold of it, because there's stuff in it that's missing from some of the later. But anyway, it's the idea of the use of women and children, of course, for the moral suasion on a massive scale of huge societies in a way that makes feminism, as you describe it, looked like some sort of fiddling little piker organisation. And but you might be interested in expanding your framework to include all that material as well. And I can't help quoting Dr. Johnson, because he's always good for a quote, who in the 1770s or 80s said, "We can't give women the vote, they've got so much power already that and he spotted what you've maybe revived."
Thank you.
I'd like your take on what happened to the people that came to disrupt here. They seem to be really upset about men's consciousness raising. It seems to really disturb them. You know, just wondering what your thoughts about what happened here tonight might be.
Well, you know, codependence is a funny thing. It's unconscious, but it's not. And so, for instance, if you challenge somebody on their cover story, every codependent has a cover story to explain their behavior in terms that reassure them. If you challenge them on that, they get upset, right? They get upset. Now, that upset tells you that at some level they know that it's a cover story.